at McEvers College, meaning the people who usually come to those schools coming in for the first time, that we do a roll call. We want to know where people came from. Tell us where you came from.
New York.
New York, where?
Harlem.
Harlem? Brooklyn? Queens? Cold Springs?
Kingston, Jamaica.
Kingston, Jamaica?
Piscataway, New Jersey.
Piscataway, New Jersey?
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C.? Bronx? Trinidad? Where specifically? Marima? Arima? Yes, I know Arima. All right. Thank you very much for coming. And let us move right away into this afternoon's proceedings. It's going to be it's quite a lot of ground to cover. And let me begin by saying that it doesn't matter what I do or the people who work with me in the John Henrik Clarke Institute. It goes for naught if you do not respond. So I want you to put your hands together for some beautiful African people that came out here in the sunshine on God's day, which is Sunday. Put your hands together for yourselves. And I want to apologize for not beginning at 3:30, but I know there are others who come and say, they're not going to begin on time. They're going to come at CP time. All right, now, I just wanted to bring some opening remarks and to somewhat add to what was already said. 1915 is an extraordinary year because it was in that year that Marcus Messiah Garvey first came to these United States of America. And it is around that time that, Carnegie, please turn the cell phones off. Would you be so kind to do so? Yes. It was in 1950 that Dr. Carter G. Woodson created what was called Black History Day, and then was developed into a subsequent week, and then, as we now know, it is Black History Month, which is 1 month. It was during 1915 that the First World War actually got its way in the United States of America, became part of it. I'm not saying that's good, I'm just chronicling the history, but because I want you to understand the context in which John Henrik Clarke was born. His birth was not one of accident. And then we're going to talk about 3 years later, a little later when Dr. Ben comes to speak. Well, quite significant too. And it was not quite 1915, but quite around that era, the United States of America experienced an insurrection. I wouldn't say an insurrection, an act of terrorism, because that's the buzzword today, against African people in Oklahoma. You guys forget that? Red Summer? So John Henrik Clarke was born at a time where the scale of balance was waning. And we believe, many of us believe, those who had direct contact with him believe that his birth was not an ordinary, but it was extraordinary, that he was sent here. And that's why it's so apt for us to talk about the great and mighty walk of Dr. John Henrik Clarke, because indeed he did walk, and his walk was not an ordinary walk. It was a mighty one, in which the footsteps left behind are indelible. I know that he had a great impact not only upon me, but many people in this audience here, a lot of us. And for those who did not have the opportunity of actually meeting physically, there's a number of different ways that you could actually get into contact with John Henrik Clarke, because when you read his books, for example, African People in World History, it's a very small book. When you read that book, you could actually hear the sound of Dr. John Henrik Clarke's very distinctive Southern accent coming through those pages. It's even more telling when you listen to the audio tapes and the videotapes. Whenever I listen to them, somehow I put in a trance, and I forgot that he's passed into the ancestral world. So with that in mind, please let us understand that we didn't simply come here this afternoon just to be among each other, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's quite good. But we want this to be 4 or 5 hours of meditation on the life of John Henrik Clarke. You don't have to go under a Bodhi tree and turn your legs into the Buddhist position to be meditating. Just by observing quite seriously and quite intently what is about to take place here would be a meditation, as it were. Now, without any further comments from me, please help me to welcome the widow of Dr. John Henrik Clarke, Sister Sybil Williams-Clarke, to come to the stage.
And it's good to see such a large crowd of young, middle-aged, and getting on in the years like myself here. I will follow up on Dr. Crawford's remarks. I don't know how many of you saw or read the papers that we now have, instead of the old Union of African States, we now have a Union of Africa. This is what Dr. Clarke in all his works wanted. He did not propose, or he didn't agree with, a United States of Africa pattern after what we have here in the United States, because he said before the advent of the European, you had what is known as a territorial state. Today we have, as a benchmark in Africa, the African states that have now formed that African Union, which is the mark of Pan-Africanism, the true Pan-Africanism. Now it will be fraught with a lot of dangers, because again, in every period of life you have those people who will accept the 30 pieces of silver. That will go on with us forever. But if we are committed, as he said, whether you go back to Africa or not, your political and spiritual heartbeat is in that land where we call home. It is, and I don't know if you have young people in your family, but I have them in my family, who keep telling me that we are multicultural. Now this comes from the rape of us, and we come in all different shades. And I have to tell them, you cannot claim a land that says multicultural. It doesn't exist. The only land that you can claim as birth of your parents who are Africans is Africa. We have to instill in our children, because it's with this new educational form that we have, one person getting control of the entire educational system. I came in a period when there was decentralization. I was in the heart of that struggle, where we developed all of the community districts, and the people had, you know, the teachers and the students and the parents had control of the curriculum. We fought a battle for curriculum, and that was a battle that we fought, and I don't think we won it. The theme is now, if we lose control of that part of the system where we choose, or we say we want our children to be taught the African history, it is going to be another battle, because we are ever reminded, I'm told that the people, our children, have to learn the history of the Holocaust. And the Holocaust that's not our Holocaust. Our Holocaust, as Dr. Jeffrey says, it's not a Holocaust, it's a Holocaust. That's what we had, and we still have it. Now, I was listening to a tape by Dr. Clarke this morning, and he said, our commitment has to be one of a priesthood. We must commit ourselves to the development and the restoration of what slavery and colonialism took away from us. That is, we must begin, again, as he said, whether we go back in flesh or in spirit, we have to connect ourselves to the development of that land. I am involved in a very small way with Project One Brother Who Goes, and he has taken upon himself to do small projects in villages. That is how you start. If there are any students here, I would say to you, it's been my experience and my early years. I met a young man from Ghana. He was all of 19 years old. He had not had a high school education. He came here and he went through 5 colleges. He got an education. He wound up at Clarke University in Massachusetts. He left here, went back to Ghana. Went back to Ghana, got a job in the cocoa industry, got a scholarship from the Indonesian government, came back here, studied banking and money at Harvard for 2 years. He finished it in 1 year, gave back the rest of the money for the scholarship, and went back to Ghana. He went back to Ghana, and Nkrumah made him chairman and managing director of the Commercial Bank of Ghana. In 6 years, he developed that Bank of Ghana from 40 branches to 100 branches all over Ghana. And he went to London, did a course in this London School of Economics, bought a horse stable in the financial district of Ghana.
Sorry, this is important. Someone has a burgundy Honda outside, ASU license plate, and no one can remember the rest of the numbers, but it had somebody damaged the window and the glove compartment, all that is open. If you have a Honda burgundy and it's outside, please go and attend to it. It's right on the sidewalk there. I'm sorry. Please.
Yeah. He bought this horse stable in London and built the Commercial Bank of Ghana. He was also, after the coup in Ghana, he came to America and became involved. But he was one of the architects of the Development Bank of Ghana, of Africa that is now existing. He went through almost every country in Ghana setting up a banking system. This man's history is not told. He was a personal friend of mine and stayed in my home. That what I'm saying to you is, if we make these connections and friendships at an early stage, we can also, in our own small way, impact on what happens on that continent. I'm speaking because I think we have, at this point, no other choice. Because as I said to people, if tomorrow this government says to you, we don't want you here, where are you going to go? There is enough land, there is enough wealth, and the wealth is there for us to look at. Now, I look at television sometimes, and I'm looking at what they call QVC and HSN. These are your shopping places. And my interest was to see where the minerals are going, the gold and the diamonds and the precious gems. Every country is a country where melanin exists. All of this wealth is all over Africa. On the beaches, in the mines, it's there. We teach our children to go to school, and we take these courses. And I'll give you an example. I have a young woman in my family who graduated from Harvard, summa cum laude. She got out, she wanted a job, she went to Lord & Taylor's, a summer job. She said, and Sybil, I stood in line, I registered, And there were a line, lots of people before her. They picked her out of a line of all those people and gave her a little summer job. And I said to her, you see what I'm telling you, it doesn't matter where you go when you come out. The opportunities are still limited. It's not there for you. So if we study when we should make the connection, I know Dr. Clarke on one of the trips made a connection with the then president of Ghana, and he advocated an exchange of students from here to there, where we would interact with each other and then build bridges so that you can begin to build that continent. Use the technical knowledge that we have, the expertise that we gain. You don't have to go back there in front. You make your connections here. You do not enter Africa at the top. You enter it at the village. That's where the power lies. That's where it is. And you have to make, if you make those connections, then you'll get an entree in, because some of us say, well, I can't go back. Yes, you can. Whatever way you do, you can. And again, you have to realize that we had a history of colonialism, they had one too, and their memory of what we were is lost, and unless we make the connection, they don't know what we went through. They don't know what slavery was, what the auction block was. Maybe some of the students who are here now know, but most of them don't. The people in the villages do not know that. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience just to go back and touch the earth, because when you go, you realize that 400 years, the first time I went to Africa, I had to tell the people, it took us 400 years to get back. And if you tell them that, it begins to hit, because they understand that it took us that long to work and to get the money to come back. If they know that the system, the economic system here allows you but so much as a paycheck to a paycheck. But some of us go back and we make believe that we have a lot of money. I don't. I tell them exactly what it is. In the marketplace, all over, you can make your connections. But I'm making an appeal to you based on what Dr. Clarke has said. He wants us to be Africans in spirit, in mind, and in our commitment. He said, wherever we are on the face of this earth, we are an African people, and we must always remember that. It is difficult in this society, again with our children, because they get up in the morning, and when they're out of school, they salute the American flag. If you have an African flag at home, let them salute that too, because they'll have a connection as to who they are and what they are. It's a difficult job. I have it right now with a young woman in my family who just graduated from Yale. She's a bright young woman. She's got a job, but I had to sit her down and let her know what it was. And she grew up in a very, very black-oriented family. But she still had problems because she grew up in a white suburb. So that she doesn't know what it is to even, I had to tell her this morning. She said, Sybil, why don't you tell me? Everybody says you don't know what it is. I said, no. Have you ever missed a meal? Have you ever missed anything at all? You've been privileged all your life. So you don't know what it is to struggle. And this is what happens to our children. Some of us do not know how to struggle. And the strength of struggling, they do not have it. They fall by the wayside, and we have to pick them up. But if we give them the strength from the beginning, if we let them know that they have responsibility, then we begin to make that difference in their character, in their choice in life, what they choose. I hope I'm not preaching. I come to you because I think all of us have the same problems in our families. Some of us have, I have them in my family. I have interracial marriages in my family. And I have to tell them, yes, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we saw what happened to Michael Jackson, right? It takes a while, even with the money, it takes a while. But it's a good lesson for all of us to understand that no matter how much you've got, if you are not a whole person, if you do not make that connection, and he said it, unless Africa is free. None of us are here are free. Just remember that. Because like every land, the Chinese at one time, we know what they said. He said, in the Puritan, the British were there. The Chinese, only the woman who entered the hotel was a cleaning woman and a prostitute. That was China. Today they're begging at the doors of Japan and China. And I read in the papers, Gaddafi said, Africa belongs to the Africans, the whites are poor. It will take them a while to be poor. But if we teach our children to understand that the minerals are there, and that they can study the mineral wealth at the University, the Colorado School of Mines. We ought to send our children to do the practical things with the best knowledge that they can gain and the technology. Take it, but do not lose your spirit as a human being. Do not lose that spirit. And we must connect, whether you have a biological family or an extended family. I have them both. They're my family, and I treat them as such. No child is different. They can be yours. You nurture that child, and you help the child to be a full human being. We have to get back to being who we were as a people before we were, just disconnected and made not to feel who we are. It is, again and again I say, because I have it in my family, I have to work with them to make them understand that their choices are but one choice. It doesn't mean that you're disloyal, but you first must be loyal to yourself and be true to yourself. And as he said, when he dies, he wants his work to go on. You bury the man and you carry the plan on. Thank you very much.
That's not enough. Put it together again. Now, Sister Sybil, as I affectionately call her, most of us who know her address her that way, is very modest. Very, very modest and very unassuming. I'm planning to do something very special for her today, and I'm going to ask you to have joined me later on, because she's in a lot of battles to maintain the legacy of Dr. Clarke, the place where he lived, his institute, which is amorphously situated in Chicago. Some of his books are in Atlanta and universities and so forth. I wish she would have said something about that. I'm going to call her back and let her give us a report on that a little later. But thank you very much, Sister Sybil. Now, the very first time I had an opportunity to see Dr. Clarke was 1981. I was a student at the University of Wisconsin in Green Bay as an undergraduate. And the library had a tape. And the tape was a tape from a show called Like It Is. But Gilmore, your show goes everywhere. So I want to... And then again, I almost forgot about Henrik Clarke, because I was in a different place at that time. I was 29 years old then. And so I came to the University of California, Santa Barbara, and then for some reason again, I stumbled onto another tape of Dr. Clarke at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And I thought that was my message. And so when I completed the first stage of my graduate study, I thought the best place for me to come was to New York, where I could actually come and commune with people like Dr. Clarke and Dr. Ben and so on and so forth. And it is my contact with Henrik Clarke that I found out about Dr. Ben. I found a black man and his family and became my Bible. Dr. Ben, that book is so torn, the pages are dirty, the ears are turned over, there are notes everywhere. My own work, Recast in Ancient Egypt, as Dr. Ben's work cited at least 100 times. But enough for my own personal experience. Please help us welcome and greet our brother Gil Noble.
Just beautiful. You're radiant this afternoon. Didn't you look lovely? The Honorable Dr. Ben, how are you, my dear brother? And your infinitely better half is seated next to you. I'm pleased to be here. I'm not a scheduled speaker, but I'm here to join a chorus of applause and remembrance and a salute to a man who has provided centrifugal force to all of us. In the work that I do, they call it journalism, electronic journalism. There's nothing that I can do effectively without being able to put it in some sort of a context. Context is everything. Even if you're not a journalist, you have to really function. Your debate in life, your quarrels in life, your successes in life are based, in my judgment, on your having a context. If you don't have an historic context of who you are and what your base is, then you are really ineffective in your argument. And one of the things that John Henrik Clarke gave me was a context. Many of us today who are burnt of skin have moved up in the echelons of this country, and they find themselves well employed and well salaried and well housed and well driven and well educated, quote unquote, and well spoken. And many of them today are suffering from historic amnesia. They've forgotten how in the heck they got the job that they hold. And so on a day like this, I don't see any of them here today. You know, they're too busy. You can find them up at Martha's Vineyard and up on the coasts and the capes and the bluffs and the, you know, sags and all of that stuff. Having a good time, totally oblivious of their vulnerability. I say to you that we are looking at a very, very difficult time that is centered around the discussion of land. And whatever our color, whether we are deeply burnt of skin or lightly burnt of skin, that basic argument is underway now. And that argument cannot effectively be fought or argued without an understanding of context. And so I'm very, very concerned about the fact that our educational institutions are not imparting that context, that contextual understanding that we all need to our young people. And so there's a mess of misunderstanding, and our young people seem, in many instances, to have gone astray. We must retrieve them, we must inform them, we must enlighten them. And so I have never forgotten the origin of my employment in television. I wouldn't be working in television if it were not for the clear, concise, powerful arguments that were made by the brothers and sisters who were giving this country a fit in the 1950s and the 1960s. And among those warriors was Professor John Henrik Clarke, and of course, my dear brother, Dr. Ben. And so I have made it my business and my personal commitment just to act as a doorway, to open the door and allow their story to be told, to move forward, to be passed on for the enlightenment of our young people. The largest number of requests for transcripts of programs that I have ever received and continue to get are from inmates in prison. And as Malcolm used to say, you're still in prison. All of us are still in prison, and yet we are seemingly bereft of a thirst for information and knowledge. So many of us now have been able to overlook all the crimes that are being committed globally. We seem to be able to step over that. Certain individuals, as I said, are in these high places, and they don't seem to be able to focus on the crimes that are being imposed on our people. They don't seem to even focus on what happened out in California recently with that young boy. And so many of us need to remind most of them of the seriousness of our position. The argument about land is crucial, I'll say, as I begin to draw my short comment to a close. The argument about land is fundamental. And to show you how crucial it is and the need for understanding is that discussion that's going on now in Zimbabwe about land. It's been going on for a while now. And those white settlers seem to be trying to get away an argument that it's their land and they're not going to allow these people, us, to take their land from them. And I heard one of them interviewed, and he said, and if we have to leave, the least they can do is give us reparations. Get to that. So it shows you that if you let somebody set the arena of your discussion, the parameters of your battle, the tactics that you use, and the arguments that you use, and the premise, well, you'll always be in a position of disadvantage. You'll always be in a position where your spine is bent. You'll always be in a position where you're asking instead of demanding land. And freedom, as has been wisely said over and over again, cannot be requested. It must be taken. If it's been taken from you, it has to be retaken. I'm not preaching hatred of any particular ethnic group or anything like that. I don't hate white people. I've been saying for a long time now, I don't hate whites. I don't hate America. I love the premise of America. I have a quarrel with America's practice. And so I say that we need to really be clear about this discussion about land. And don't let anybody in this country talk about the criminal actions that are being committed today without putting it in a context. There's a whole context that needs to be laid out. And I'm not being an apologist for any particular groups or anything like that. But it seems to me that it needs to be emphasized very clearly what is going down on this planet and who did it and how it was done. And if our young people can understand that, I say, look out. They were dangerous in the 50s and the 60s, and they're dangerous now if only we can join in waking them up. Don't be upset about the paucity of our numbers. It's the kinetic energy that I feel from you that you should be proud of. Hold on to it and keep it burning.
Do it again, people. We're sorry that Brother Gilnoble has to leave and had to be so brief, but I'm sure that everything that he said was quite poignant, and again, I hope that we internalize everything that's being said here today. There's a number of important people who were not on the program, but who were here, that will be given an opportunity to speak. And I want us to first acknowledge Brother Dr. Ngemi sitting there. Please, Brother. And then, and also, and together, there's Brother James Small sitting right over here. And then we have Sister Kefa, who served as provided a space for both Dr. Ben and Dr. Clarke on a weekly basis for many, many years. She's sitting in the back there. And then I have a lot of personal friends in the audience, too many to enumerate. I won't enumerate all of you. Welcome to everyone, and you are just as important as the people who just pointed out. Now, let us now venture into what I would regard one of the features of today's proceedings, and that is to hear from Dr. Clarke himself. Can we be African again? Roland, would you help me to move the podium? Now, I want to make a promise to you. One of our speakers, Gary Bird, what's up, Gary Bird? Everybody knows him, right? Yeah. He's delayed. He's come from Pennsylvania. But if for whatever reason he doesn't get here on time before we do, I'm going to show you the second half of this. Is that a deal? Yeah. All right. Now, we have a number of other speakers to come. And Professor James Small, I'm going to invite him. I've turned his wrist to come here and to bring greetings and to say something on behalf of Dr. Clarke, since they had such an intimate relationship for a long time. I know he has to go to another engagement, so could you stand and give a welcome to Professor James Small?
Dr. Ben, you gonna give me permission to say anything today, sir? I love your dress. It's beautiful. Hi, Sister Gary. Peace and blessings to the rest of my elders, sisters, brothers, friends, comrades. John just spoke for himself, really. What you saw was a man who was African. And he just was. He was just being what those elders in the South taught him to be, an African man. What we, many of us who were taught similar and the same things, what John did different from us, he took responsibility for whom he was. And many of us have not taken responsibility for who we are. And sadly, even many of us who are here, we are still simply expressing African aesthetics. And we are not allowing the teachings of John Clarke to transform our characters. And if we get serious enough to understand, death will do all of us apart from this world as we currently know it, consciously appreciate it. Meaning, in this physical body, we're going to be gone in some short period of time. What is going to be the mark that you're going to leave for eternity? And you cannot leave your mark unless you become an African again. And you cannot become an African again unless you look back and allow the knowledge of the ancestors to transform your character. That's it. My weakness is just to say, just to have known him physically for a minute in time was more than I deserved. But to be able to listen to his words, read his words, those are the thinking of his mind that's on the paper. That's him on the paper as he's transforming his consciousness If you listen to him, he will transform your consciousness. If African people are to be free, we must not allow ourselves to be frauds in terms of consciousness and character. We must, and this is not an indictment because I'm where you are, but what I'm saying consciously is that we must use the wisdom of the ancestors and the elders to transform ourselves into the being we must become. And if we do that, he would not have lived in vain. But if we only give accolades and only make ceremonial praises, he would have lived for nothing. He would have done all of that research for nothing. He would have suffered for nothing. But if we take what he brought forth from the garden, take the harvest that he presented as food, allow it to recreate us and transform us back into our ancestors, then we can talk about designing the free African world. I'm impressed with the African Union conceptually, but as Dr. Clarke was, I'm not impressed with a single government in Africa. No, I'm particularly impressed with a single leader in Africa. But I do praise all of them for doing what their consciousness have allowed them to do. But we must appreciate, given our people's condition, none of it is good enough. And so we must take responsibility that before we leave this planet, we must ensure that the generations we are producing and that they will produce will not go down to the genocide of a minority of this world's population. And unless we decide that the only question that exists is to be African or not to be at all, then we have doomed the future generations. Africa will be free when the mind of Africans realize it is their responsibility to free it, and that cannot be done unless our memory becomes the memory of every ancestor. And I'll end with this about the past, present, and future. The future does not exist. It is a place you go for hope, for aspirations, for motivation. But you can't reach up in there and get nothing to build anything with. The present is coming into being. It has no completed design, models, blueprint, or master for you to imitate. Only in the past can you find the blueprint, the masters, the mastery, the models, and the design to build in the present for that motivational space you call the future. And the instant the present creates a completed model, does not become the future, it becomes the past again to be studied and imitated again. So it is our ancestors then that is the repository of the wisdom that you call the future and the salvation of our people. Dr. Clarke was African. That was his great gift. He was real, like you.
Again, please. Now, we are going to, we have Dr. Ben on our program. Put your hands together, Dr. Ben. And then we still have William Banks and Earl King and Imhotep Gary Bird and Professor Ngemi. So there's quite a lot of more to come. But before we move any further, I am asking you to extend your love to us, to John Henrik Clarke. You know, for many years I saw his name, Joseph A.A. But I was so ashamed and so embarrassed and shy to go and ask him what the AA meant. But guess what? I got to find out what the AA meant when the time came for me to put together his resume, because he was recommended for an honorary degree here at McGill College. That was a historic occasion. I know Dr. Ben is a very strong, stalwart individual. And for the first time, I saw Dr. Ben, this bulwark of strength, this temple that is as strong as the temple of Abu Simbel, Ramses II. I saw Dr. Ben winced and tears came to his eyes. It was a wonderful occasion. When he pronounced this is for the very first time in his life that he was given a degree by a black man at a black university. For several times, I had the occasion to introduce Dr. Ben. And every time I introduce him, I know there's always some things that I must repeat, and there are other things that, that occur to me. But I want to say, personally and publicly, that I want to thank Dr. Ben for opening the way of the Nile Valley to Africans in the diaspora. I know that we'll be given applause, but you would not be able to really appreciate what Dr. Ben has done until you go and see the terrain that he traversed for 40-odd years. 50 years. So those people who never had an opportunity, there's a picture of me now. Those people who never had an opportunity to go to Egypt, the Nile Valley, I am not walking in Dr. Ben's shoes because his shoes are so large, my feet are so small. I can't fill them. But I will certainly do my best to attempt to continue the work that Dr. Ben did in the Nile Valley. And so, you know, talk is cheap. So I'm putting my mouth and my money and my energy where all of that is this summer. We still have a few seats are always available. So those people who are interested, we still have the flyers out there. Run over to Gigi's Travel tomorrow, not tomorrow, tomorrow's, oh yes, Monday, yeah? And make your final arrangements. So, without any further ado, I am going to ask Dr. Ben to do us the honor and to grace us with his presence and a presentation, not simply only about Dr. Clarke, but about himself, his relationship with Dr. Clarke, and his relationship to African people. This is a living example of who an African is. Brothers and sisters, please stand and put your hands together.
Not by myself alone, but with my wife, who we are married now 50 years. And I presentation to Mrs. Clarke for the benefit of her being the widow of Dr. John Bobo Henrik Clarke. And I want to make it's quite rarely I put on African clothes. I have them hanging in my closet. And I don't know if it was wise to wear East African or West African clothing. But I need to say why I feel that it's necessary to wear African clothes today and not at another certain day. Because, first of all, I must make the oneness of ourselves. Because in 1620, every one of you, your parents came to this part of the world in 1620 from Barbados on a holiday going to England. But the ship ran into some trouble off Cape Hatteras and was posted to Virginia, and thus you came here. Now, we could hear all kinds of star evidence, something you got from the moon, from a little dipper, or something. You could keep the dipper on the moon and go to hell with that. You need documentation or actual something in your hand. Proof. I don't want to hear anything that you got from God or goddess or the moon. Dr. Clarke spoke of African people. We are all African people. Some of us came from foreign shores like myself. But we all have differences, different experiences that we should share with each other. And the information I plan to share with you this evening about Dr. Clarke, I have to take time to do this because it goes over 55 years that I met Dr. Clarke. And to give a few minutes lecture of something that happened for 55 years is a very difficult thing. But I met Dr. Clarke, or John Clarke. At the time I met him, he wasn't Dr. Clarke, and I wasn't Dr. anybody. And I met him a day, we were going to Arthur Orlando Schomburg. That's a black Puerto Rican from San Juan. And we were going to the Schomburg collection, who's at 135th Street, but not on the corner, it's the next building. The building ran from 135th Street into 136th Street. And we were going to speak to Arthur Schomburg to find from him what we can about black history. Well, then we didn't call it black history, we said African history, because we know we weren't colored. Some of you are colored up to now, and we weren't Negroes. Negroes is a word that went to Spain, negro, meaning black. We know enough of our own research, but we didn't know sufficient. And we went to Arthur Orlando Schomburg to ask, Arthur Alonzo Schomburg was the first black man to work in the Wall Street area, other than a porter or elevator operator or anything of that sort. He worked, the first black man to work in an office downtown. And so when we went to ask him, we went quite independently. And we met Mr. Schomburg and asked him the question. And he said to us, go back and study the history of your master and then come back to me. I hadn't known John Clarke, though John Clarke didn't know me. But then we were given this problem together. Then I spoke to John and John spoke to me. I knew just then, because I asked, and we exchanged age with each other, and I knew John was 3 years older than myself, and I had to respect him because he was older than myself. So from that day on, I had to give John, whenever we met in company, the right to speak first. And I never asked him any question that deters the information of his right to be inferior to me. That meant that any time I had to ask John a question or felt that I should deny something that he said, I couldn't do it in the presence of anyone else, because that would be disrespectful. Though I felt that he might be wrong, I had to do that in our privacy. I had to speak to him. And though times I disagreed with John, I couldn't disagree in public. And I kept that respect until he passed away, and I keep it up to now. But there was more than that. John had gone through, like most of us, I had gone through. I had come here. I had lived in the Caribbean for quite some time, lived in Puerto Rico, went to college down there and spent much of my time in that place and in St. Works. I had lived in the motherland equally. As a matter of fact, I was born somewhere in Ethiopia, and they said, according to my mother, my father made me someplace in the Suez Canal. That's her, and I don't disagree. She should know. But the question of John Clarke seems to be very easy today. But it's not easy for me, because I didn't realize that I had liked John or loved John that much until the day when he passed away. And I asked his widow, did he really die? Because I couldn't believe he had died. I had spoken to him the morning before. I was making a picture to the same person who had made his picture. They were making a picture for me. So when I asked her, did John, and before I could say what I had to say, she said, yes, he had passed. Well, you could imagine, I was asking when I'm going to see him and be involved in his going away and so forth. And they told me that arrangements are made in front of the Unity, the Belter Funeral Home in the Presbyterian Church there. And I immediately said, church? John in a church? Because I know that he was a man prone to religion. But nevertheless, I went to church and I tried to speak over John's fear. But it was like this, and to look down and to speak and watch him in that box was more than I could take, and I passed out. The brothers brought me back together, and I was told that he would be in Adam Powell Church the next day. I decided I couldn't do it. So I went down the next day, Sister Sybil and everybody come with a big car and everything, it was glamorous treatment. And I went to Powell's church. And I went up at the rostrum just like this. And to speak about John, I started to speak, but you see, I have always wanted a brother. My mother had 7 children. I was the 4th child in between. And none of them, those before me and those after me, didn't make 3 years old. I alone survived. So you can imagine that John had become close to me in a sense that I can't explain materially. He was more than that. So